Welcome to a conversation with Senator Michael Moore. Senator Michael Moore is our state senator serving the 2nd Worcester District, comprising, amongst other places, the most important place, which is the community of Shrewsbury and its 37,000 residents. Michael, how are you?
I'm very good, thank
Here
you.
we are. We're in April. We did a program in March. We're on a roll.
We are
on a roll here, and we're in such a roll. We have a new table. We have new chairs. Real plastic mahogany right
I guess
here.
the revenues must be up since the show's been on.
Absolutely right. Oh boy, oh boy. So, what's new with Senator Michael Moore? What you been doing since we last talked to each other? When we last talked to each other, we were talking about, on substance, we were talking about the start of the budget process in the House of Representatives and all that sort of stuff. But what's going on with you? Other than you still opening places up and covering ribbons?
If someone was to tell me that the economy is bad, I'm just going to say, go to my Facebook page and look at all the ribbon cuttings between Westboro and the 495 Corridor Commission and the Worcester Chamber. We've had more ribbon cuttings of more small businesses.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
No, it really
and I
is.
am a Facebook peeper, whatever it's will. Well, I don't participate. I usually just sneer to myself and laugh and then watch the whole thing.
And that's just me. And there's the other elected officials going to all the openings. So there's a really, I think the economy is going strong. Obviously, we have some issues with cost of living and the supply chain.
It's inflation.
And
what causes inflation? In my oversimplified college degree in English literature, is we spend too much, okay? Consumers are spending too much. And I say to people, you want to stop, you want to drop the inflation rate, stop buying stuff, okay?
Yeah. Well, but and no disrespect to anyone in the federal government, but there was a lot of money that was out there.
Oh, of course.
That's from the previous administration, the current one. There's money out there, people are spending, so there's a shortage.
Absolutely.
And we don't have, every policy area that we deal with all have one consistent issue. There's short staff.
Yes.
So you don't have the staff, you can't then manufacture more to keep up with the pace of the products being sold.
No question about it.
Yeah. So
why aren't people working?
Well, I don't actually know if it's why aren't people working. I read one article that was talking about the baby boomers.
Yeah.
And I'm at the tail end.
Right.
63 is at the very end of the baby boomers. Yeah. And it talked about
That's 1963, right?
Yes. Thank you. That the baby boomers are now, with the baby boomers exiting the workforce, we are looking at about 2.2, I think 2.3 million people who have left the workforce.
Right.
And you think about the baby boomers, we were the largest demographic as far as, it's for supplies, workers.
Sure.
So, we've got that workforce leaving. We've also had, since the pandemic, other people that have just realized, hey, I don't have to work until I'm 60, 65 to retire. Right. My retirement's not going to be as affluent, but it's less stressful. I have more time with the family. So we've had people, I guess, slowing down. But we're not seeing increases in unemployment. We're not seeing increases in the human services type programs that we need. But I will say one thing that we do see, and that's the increase in food insecurity. And if all the food banks, we see a lot of pressure on them. But you got to look at we're also experiencing, that's where we're seeing some of the highest cost of inflation is the food. Right. So
intriguing. It's absolutely intriguing. It really and truly is.
Yeah.
You look at the stock market. The stock market is, my wonderful people, my life is run by Morgan Stanley and what I continue to call my snake oil salesman, buy high, sell low kind of people. And they're saying you don't have patience. It's slowing down. It has slowed down, but it's stayed relatively stable. Everybody keeps talking about, in recession, there's something magical about the word, I guess, that scares people, because recession is basically inflation is high and people are having employment problems.
Well, it's
both in being employed and trying to employ, you know.
And they're talking about there's one, for every one worker, there's 2 jobs out there.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So, yeah, so the issue of people not having access to employment
Right.
is not there.
Right.
But we do have, there is talk of recession, and some of that also factors into the higher interest rates that we're seeing.
Right.
And that's
Purpose of which is to slow down people buying, getting loans to buy stuff.
well, some of yes.
I know
but-
I'm oversimplifying
Yeah,
it.
but no, but there's also the issue now that concerns me is with what happened with SVB
Oh, yeah.
Bank
Yeah.
and all the venture capital money.
Right.
And so I vice chair the committee on financial services. So when that whole issue happened with SVB.
Okay, so why am I talking? You're so much smarter than me.
Oh, no,
Keep
no,
talking.
no, I'm not. All I'm going to say is that that when we met with the banking commissioner,
Yeah.
surprisingly, now we all know Massachusetts, we have a very strong tech economy.
Right.
But she was telling us.
Which California had too, which is
Well,
where this crazy
but-
bank was.
Well, but this is what surprised me is we had more businesses that were affected by SVB than California did. So if the
okay.
federal government didn't come in and back
Yeah.
those deposits,
We're going to give you your money back, right?
we would have had real problems here in
That's right,
Massachusetts.
because of all the tech people who were.
Yeah.
That's right. There was the pictures of. It was this bank in California, and I'm looking at the pictures in the Globe and occasionally in the Telegram, and it was a picture of a bank in Wellesley.
Yeah.
That was
First
one
thing.
of their banks, and they were lined up in front of this place.
Yeah.
I said, "Why are they banking in Canada?" The whole tech stuff. Huh?
Yep, the venture
Fascinating.
capital. That's a few people I've talked to have that's a concern where the banking industry is going to go.
Right.
Now, if we see a consolidation there, do we lose a lot of the mid-regional banks or some of the smaller banks get eaten up? Which that could be devastating to the economy because a lot of the smaller banks are the ones that feed our small businesses.
Right.
That's where people go to. So do we see some
Consolidation.
yeah, and if we can see some consolidation, then where's the revenue going to come from, or the loans for these people that want to start businesses?
Yeah.
So that's yet to be seen how that's going to totally play out.
All right.
So
Okay. Every kid in high school for the summer should have a summer job.
I agree.
Kids don't do that anymore.
I'll just talk to my son.
Is he got a job?
I just told him he's coming back. He's at school, so he's trying to.
UMass.
UMass Amherst.
Okay.
So
Oh,
he-
that's right. This is still April. Okay,
Yes.
so he's still in school.
Well, but I told him because he's talking about that, and I said, look, you should start calling now.
Yeah.
No, it's too early. I was like, no, call now before you get back. You don't want to wait till you get back.
Right.
So yeah,
I
so
love it.
so I agree with you. Yeah. So and then my daughter's graduating this May.
Okay, but she's probably got a job, and wasn't she interning at some big high-red?
Yeah, she was
tech
interning
place?
at a research lab called Blueprint Lab in Cambridge.
Yeah.
And so they actually offered her a position at the end of her junior year. So they just finalized the offer. So she
Alright.
starts, I think,
Okay.
July 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's all set. Very, very good offer.
Isn't it nice to know that they're employed?
Yes, that's,
every
that's just
so-
what I say to everyone.
Every so often, people would ask us, even at this advanced stage that Virginia and I are at, how are your kids? And my answer to that is my 3 kids are great. One's in Shrewsbury, one's in Ithaca, one's in California, and right at the moment, they are fully employed and not living at home. Okay, and that was one of the requirements. Okay, get you through school. Okay, get a job, and move on.
Move out.
And it's wonderful. It's
Well, I
kind
was-
of happened, but happened in a knock on wood in a good sort of way.
With no disrespect, I am hoping I'm not at least in one situation. And that I hope my children will all stay here in Massachusetts. So my
Oh, in
daughter is looking good.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, the fact you've got one in California, that's a long way to have to travel to see you.
It certainly is. It
Yeah,
certainly
that would
is.
be a little-
She's been there for 20 years.
Oh, really? So
And
there's
I
no
get
chance
to-
of her coming back?
But, oh no, she's in the film industry, and
Oh, okay.
that's where you have to be. You
Yeah,
have
but
to be the-
Massachusetts, we got a blossoming
Oh,
film
and
industry. She should come back and start her own production studio.
She's ecstatic about the fact that maybe you think she'll get a film that's being shot in beautiful downtown Worcester, or at least Boston, for Pete's sake. Yeah, there is awful lot of that going on.
Oh, there is. Yeah, it really is.
Truly, you know.
Yeah.
But such is life. They do what they have to do.
Yes. Yep.
Right. As long as they get a job. We were talking just before the program, nostalgia, okay, about my dad, only child. Okay, so I'm ending my first year of high school. Okay, and my dad says, summertime, you're not hanging around here for the summer, you're going to get a job. Go get a job for the summer. I said, okay, and I got a job for the summer, anyway.
Yeah.
And every summer thereafter, it was a summer job someplace. And it's just like kids today, and there's a helicopter attitude, I guess, that my kids have to be themselves. I said, yeah, okay.
But also,
But working isn't a bad job. I can remember one summer, my son Chris got a job. What was the paper company in Westboro? There was a big paper company in Westboro, and it was
Chase Paper.
Chase, and Arthur
Arthur
Chase was city councilor or whatever. He was everything. And Chris got a job down there. We had a friend who worked there, and they said, "Yeah, they're going to help for the summertime." And I went down. And, after a couple of days, he said, "This is really hard, and I don't like it." And I said, "You know what, Chris? It's a learning experience." You're saying that to a 16-year-old, okay? It's a learning experience. And what you're going to find out when you work there for a summer is you don't want to spend the rest of your life doing that, okay? And you'll be able to move on. He said, "Okay, I got it, Dad. Okay. Do you have a job?" He says, "No, Dad, I don't have a job. I have a learning experience." Okay. He was a fresh kid then, and he's still a fresh kid. Okay. Under the Golden Dome.
Yes.
What's going on?
So House budget,
Budget.
Governor released their budget.
Yep.
House just released their budget.
Right.
Last week, the week before, they are going into debate it this week.
Yeah.
So their budget unveiled was a $56.2 billion budget.
Right. That's very
that
interesting. All the stats all the numbers and everything that your dear communication guy named Alex, whose last name I still can't pronounce, Muradian?
No, that's the state rep for Grafton.
Oh, that's
Mutafian.
Utakian. Okay. All right. We Irish have problems with those.
So we've got
But in any event,
so their budget covers universal school meals, expanded scholarship program for in-demand jobs, competitive grants to encourage renewable energy projects in public schools. It also has the same language as the governor's budget as far as the fair share. And
okay, you're jumping way ahead of me now. Slow down.
In documenting.
Moira Healy puts out a budget that she says the budget should be 56.2, and
no, that's the House. She was 55.5 billion.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I got it wrong. Okay, so hers was 55.5.
Yep.
And they send it over to the House of Representatives, and as we explained on one of our previous programs, the House can throw the whole thing out, adopt it, change it, amend it, do whatever the bloody they want. But they came back with a budget that's $56 billion. So they came back with more money than my progressive liberal governor proposed.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. I loved it. When I saw the numbers, I said, "My God, they raised it." Okay.
So it's going to be interesting to see what we do after what we do. Now, there's a good chance.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting.
There's a good chance that 56.2 is going to get a little higher after the budget process, after they do the amendments and
in the House?
In the House.
So that the House number could go
Yes, so you could see that number go up a little higher.
Okay, all right. That's absolutely fascinating process. Okay, now, having cleared that up as I have said in my English Literature College mind, we now have this new thing called the Fair Share Amendment.
Yes.
It is now a constitutional amendment to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that basically says there is going to be a 4% increase income tax on those people who I gather earn or report more than $1 million in income, right?
Yep.
And it's not a kickback. It's not a cliff thing. It's you pay the 4% on whatever you're cleared, whatever your adjusted gross income is more than $1 million.
$1 million,
And this was the one that when we had it with all the campaigning and all the advertising that was spent on it, I used to laugh like heck. I said those who were opposed to this, who were mostly people who had high rent or $1 million worth of income, they spent more than several $1 trillion on advertising when they had the campaign, which I found absolutely fascinating. I said, if you saved all your dough, you wouldn't have to worry about this whole thing. But in any event, that's where we are. Okay.
Yes. Now the estimate is that for this first year, anyways,
Right.
They're being conservative about the estimate, and they're only estimating about $1 billion to come in.
But only $1 billion. I
Well, there was some of the
love it when we talk numbers.
Some of the original
a
estimates
$1
were
billion.
anywhere between 1.5 and 2.
Okay.
Then they've come down and said, well, it could be 1.2. So the consensus revenue numbers,
Figure $1 billion.
$1 billion.
All right. Now that has to be spent on education and transportation.
Yes.
Okay.
Now there's one thing.
By constitutional amendment requirement, right? Yes. But you are going to tell me that you are going to tell me the but.
The but
We
is
talked about this before.
that it doesn't say in the there's the taxes in place, but this referendum was this constitutional amendment referendum was before the voters.
Yep.
4 years ago.
Yep.
It was appealed.
We said no. Right.
And the state Supreme Court said you can. It was against the Constitution to target it to education and transportation. You couldn't direct the money. So the amendment calls for the additional 4% on revenue or on income over $1 million. There's nothing in it that says it has to go to education or transportation. That's what the intent of it is. To go along with the intent, Governor Haley actually put in her budget, and this is what the House also did in their budget too, is included transparency measures to track the funding and spend with the fair share by including a special dedicated fund for the monies over $1 million to go into that fund. This way we know.
What do you mean over $1 million?
I mean,
$1 billion.
No, what I meant to say is the fair share money
Yeah.
that comes in from this new tax
Goes into
goes
a
into
different pot.
Right. This way there can be accurate control and
Okay.
watchdog transparency over how the money is spent.
Okay.
Now, one thing that should be mentioned, because I've had some conversations with some of my municipalities, never during the campaign for the fair share
Right.
did it say that the education money would go to Chapter 70.
Right.
Now, Chapter 70 is the local aid that comes back from the state to the cities and towns
Right.
for education.
Right.
It just said education. So we've had some, I guess, confusion in thinking that once this was passed, this money was all going to be directed there. We have higher education, which obviously doesn't go to Chapter 70.
Right.
We've got early education.
All right, so just so that I understand, and all of our thousands and thousands of watchers understand, is that Chapter 70 is money that goes back to municipalities.
Correct.
Strictly for
education and the municipalities.
Okay. All right. So Shrewsbury gets X number of dollars,
By a formula, by the,
however amount that is, by some formula. And that has to be used for educational purposes.
Correct.
In the community of Shrewsbury.
Yes.
Okay, fine. This fair share thing just says education.
Education.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. And so education is
higher ed,
higher ed,
could be special
special ed, okay, all sorts of
Could be,
other
that's right.
Okay.
Early ed.
So you're saying some of the municipalities are saying, why isn't that all going?
Why haven't we seen a bigger increase?
Of which there is an increase.
There is an
in
increase.
the budgets.
Yep.
Okay.
But they said, why aren't we seeing more of an increase.
Okay, because
with
that
this
dough
money.
should all go through Chapter
Right.
70.
So we've seen
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's increases in the budget for early ed. There's increase in budget for
Right.
higher education.
Right.
The Senate actually last year did an early education piece
Yeah.
that never ended up getting passed by the House. So
Yep.
you could see that come back. So some of that revenue could go to that. So so that's all. There just seemed to be a misunderstanding on some of the local officials that they thought that this money was going back.
Well, I think there was a misunderstanding amongst other people saying, you know, this is a constitutional requirement. And I remember when that case came down 4 years ago in which the SJC said, no, you can't do this,
Right.
okay? And it got thrown out, okay?
Yeah.
For however many years ago it is now, okay? And that this came in and it says, okay, this is going to be earmarked money. And the words earmarked were always used, okay?
Yeah.
But we do understand education is something else. It's like transportation. I mean, transportation is a very generic word for all sorts of stuff that I guess involves cars, planes, buses, bicycles, motorcycles, roadways, and all of that sort of good stuff.
So you could have it be for Massport. You could have it be for
Sure.
the MBTA. You could be
Yeah.
for the RTAs.
Well, a lot of it's going in the
Yeah,
MBTA.
So roadways, bridges. So
Sure.
there's
Okay.
a lot of applications that this money could go for.
Okay.
But
Okay.
to me, one of the important parts about it is to try to go with the intent of it. Is the money and how it's being spent can be tracked because it's going to this dedicated fund. So
Right.
we'd be able to see, okay, did that
Did the money go for education?
Correct.
Okay.
So, or transportation, so we'll be able to track that.
Okay.
So,
You know what concerned me when this was being voted on, and I've heard a couple of people saying, okay, so there's going to be $1 billion, allegedly. There's going to be $1 billion in this fund. Okay, this is extra $1 billion in addition to the ordinary budget requirements that deal with education and transportation, right? I said, in addition to this is in a special pot. In addition to that, you guys and gals who are down there are appropriating lots of money for education and
so right, so you take
transportation
this-
out of the real budget. And my concern was at the very beginning of, you know, they're going to say, well, you know, we can in our budget we can cut that down a bit because all this other dough is going into that sort of fund. And I always wondered whether that was going to be a concern. And I hear that Governor Healy, this will be spent in addition to existing transport and education funding levels, right?
so that's the intent of it.
I love it. This is the
And I personally, I do think along the line as Governor Haley, I actually think we should be a little bit more stricter in the language,
Yeah.
so that we can't supplant money.
Right.
So I think.
Supplant, that's the word I was
Yeah,
looking for.
so I think there should be something a little stronger in there that we can't. So you're right. So basically, if you took this $1 billion extra,
Yeah.
just looking at Chapter 70, which pretty much is what they're doing right now in the revenues that we have, existing revenue stream coming in.
Right.
We've been able to increase it. When we did the Student Achievement Act 6 years ago,
Yeah.
or 4 years ago,
Yeah.
we're on track right now to meet the increase because that's when they did the formula. It was said that we're about $2 billion underfunding our cities
Okay,
and towns.
you're losing me.
The Student Achievement Act, that's when we did
What was the Student
That
Achievement
was
Act?
the Chapter 70, that's the
Yeah.
school funding formula.
Right.
That was established in the early 90s.
Yeah.
There was a committee to look at it because it was argued from municipalities that it wasn't keeping pace with the funding that our cities and towns need.
Okay.
It was looked at and it was determined, the task force came out with a report stating that, I think it was $2 billion that we were underfunding.
Okay, so that was, whatever this task force did, said, you know, the municipalities are right.
Right.
You got up the dough.
So we then have, even before this, have been appropriating extra money based on that report
Okay,
to get the cities and towns to where that report stated they should be.
right.
So, so we are,
And does that go into Chapter 70 funding?
Yeah, that goes into Chapter 70. Now, none of this fair share money, the main is going into that right now.
Oh, okay.
So if money were to go back to the cities and towns, in addition to that Chapter 70, I think it would have to be a higher amount.
Right.
There's nothing to say that we can't put more money on top of it.
Right.
And nothing I said, now we can't supplant it, but right now the intent is not to supplant the money.
Okay. All right. All right. And talk about supplanting money. One of the deals is rather than money coming in from wherever it's coming, there's a lot of money that's going out, and there is the House has a tax reform proposal.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And it is, in substance, $654 million tax release plan for fiscal 2024.
Yep.
And that is money that is basically going back to the citizens of our good Commonwealth, correct? In
Correct.
various fashions.
Yes.
Okay. We discussed this a little bit before, and let's run through them. There's a child and family tax credit. Okay. There was a lot of stuff on the news just recently about caregivers who are family members who are taking care. There's a wonderful program on one of the commercial channels. It was basically, this woman who's taking care of her demented or Alzheimer's husband full time. I mean, that's what she does.
Yep.
Okay. And there's no relief for her in various fashions. So one of this is to include those kind of people in some kind of a tax program.
Yes.
Tax credit, $600
Yep.
bucks. Okay. Not a whole lot of dough, but $600 is $600.
So it's $600 per child,
Yeah.
dependent with disabilities,
Yeah.
senior dependent,
Right.
and this is no limit on the amount in that household.
Okay. All right. Okay. Do you know?
So we're running short on
We have
time?
been talking for almost 28 minutes.
Okay, so
And
quickly. 62F.
Yeah.
That's the tax referendum that was passed by the
Yep.
voters back in the late 80s.
Yep.
That's what we ended up, people got the checks back for it in the late fall.
Yep.
The House in their proposal is trying to make adjustments to that. Right now it's formula based.
Yeah.
They are trying to make it a flat fee.
Across the board number.
Right.
Good idea, I think. But again, we'll talk to it the next time that we do this. How do we manage to run through a half hour?
Well, we spend the first 10
So
minutes on
quickly.
other.
No, but that's okay. But we're
no, I
talking
agree.
about the
Yeah.
philosophies of life, okay?
Yeah.
Hey, folks that watching us, it's April. We'll be back in May. Do not forget municipal government elections soon.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Please vote and stay with us.